And today, in the next 10, 15 minutes, we're just going to go over the past 4 years or so that I've had watching the growth of programmatic digital out-of-home in the industry. And I'm going to start by jumping right into it. Obvious statement. Oh, you get the joke. Okay. Are you American?
No.
Okay.
But we have coverage worldwide.
God. He has coverage worldwide, too. But you're not going to like me very much. I walk. Okay. So everybody knows digital out-of-home is a pretty spectacular medium. And for those of you who didn't get it, in the words of Donald Trump, everybody knows, it's true. And I'm saying that not because I work in the space, but because I'm a consumer, and I love to shop, and I love to eat out, and I love to travel, and that all kind of makes me a prime demographic for advertisers. And given that, like many folks spend 70% or more out of their home, I definitely do, I fall into a category where I pay more attention to brands who incorporate digital out-of-home into their campaigns. I walk by Link NYC totems when I'm in Manhattan, and I see screens on elevators on my way up to meetings, and I order off of digital menu boards when I'm getting my lunch, and I pass by totems in shopping malls when I'm shopping during my lunch, and I see screens at the top of taxis and in taxis and on the side of the freeway when I'm in a taxi on the way to the airport. I see screens in the airport lounge, on the airplane, and even when I get to the gym, on the treadmill. So advertising through digital out-of-home is not lost on me as a consumer. And there's a stat here from eMarketer that was from 2015. 40% of out-of-home spend is from digital. I actually was reading The Drum in January. There was an article on January 20, and Clear Channel UK said that 7 years ago, 2% of their revenue came from digital out-of-home. Today, that's over 60, and that's something that they're seeing worldwide. So once again, we see DOOH everywhere. It's very prominent. Places like Times Square, the Las Vegas Strip, the London Underground, the screens in all these places powered by BroadSign. And these are just a few of the top 100 advertisers who also advertise on BroadSign-powered digital out-of-home displays. So when we're talking about programmatic, the issue isn't really the technology, even though that's something that I'll get to and we'll talk about. It's really because programmatic is solving the problem, why don't we see more of overall ad spend coming into our space? And that's because not everybody actually knows how great digital out-of-home is. And to me, that came as a bit of a surprise because for the past 4 years, I've just fallen in love with our space. But I have spent a lot of time recently talking to agencies, going out and discussing BroadSign's new programmatic offering. And we don't just jump into programmatic, even though coming from digital, that's all of the agency's expertise. We usually spend our first meeting, our first few meetings, talking about what they can do with digital out-of-home. And they're usually surprised about the simplest things. We had a campaign in Sydney, and it was for Porsche. It was for one of our customers there. And there was a camera installed to a digital billboard on top of a highway. And when Porsche drivers were driving up towards the screen, the camera detected the Porsches, and an ad played to the Porsche drivers. And people at agencies are like, you can do that? And I go, yeah, you should talk to Quividi. But the problem is not getting everybody excited, because once we talk about what we can do, agencies are really quick to want to get on board. And this picture is a little pixelated. I quoted an American, so I feel like I have to quote a Canadian. This is Drake. And the problem is, Drake probably wasn't talking about digital out-of-home when he said this, but it applies nonetheless. So he said, don't play hard to get, play hard to forget. And I think the latter part, and I'm going to use this because I always wanted to, this one, play hard to forget. We've got that. Digital out-of-home campaigns have been making much more of a stir, especially over the past year. We see campaigns winning awards at Cannes Lion, and in November of last year, Spotify ran this awesome out-of-home campaign where they crunched local data and thanked everybody locally for a weird 2016. And one of my favorites was, to the person who listened to Justin Bieber's Sorry over 40 times in a row, what did you do? So, you know, these are very memorable. And I think as an industry, we've done a really good job, even if they're one-off deployments, showing people that we really have what it takes to make a splash and be memorable. But the hard to get part is where we have a huge issue, because as Jose was just saying, if agencies who are really excited about deploying digital out of home, they want to run a campaign, they're going to have to reach out to half a dozen, or in your example, 40 different media owners. And they're going to be obtaining different proposals, and they're going to have to execute across a bunch of different sizes and resolutions of displays. Some of those displays might be able to play video, some not. And then at the end of it all, they're going to be getting proof of performance reports that all don't make sense and don't add up. And they have to go then do the crunching themselves. That's not worth their time. So we've just understand that we need to do something about improving sales, and that's where programmatic comes in. But we have another issue, another roadblock on this long road to programmatic in our space. And from a technology perspective, it's the fact that there are no cookies, and nobody is more devastated about this than I am, because I love dessert. But measurement, as Jose also said, is fundamental to us making sure that we can allow our medium to be bought in a similar way to digital and mobile and television. And everybody, once again, they freak out in the same way that they might have to contact a dozen different media owners. And we can't measure your space because your space doesn't have cookies. And we're used to using cookies. We like cookies. And I say, I know I like cookies too, but we're going to have to figure something else out. So BroadSign's approach is to use multi-layering. We have a ton of data in our space, and a lot of this data is from first parties, so media owners. They have really rich information about their audiences. So once again, we go to the word education, and it's really up to us to make sure that we are talking to agencies about how this first party data can be implemented in a way that makes sense. And this is a long conversation because first-party data will vary depending on the vertical. Train stations, we can get ticket stubs and we can know a lot that way. The same thing applies in cinema. It also relies on the geography. But once we layer this and we include analytics from camera-based measurement, for example, we get a much better idea of the type of viewers that we're speaking to. And that poses a great opportunity for our space. There are other technical issues as well when we're trying to make a solution for programmatic. And there are some here on the slide, but I'm going to talk about a few. One is the fact, actually, I'm going to talk about the business side first, because that's probably the biggest issue at hand. Programmatic, I should tell you, the way I view programmatic is the automation of workflows based on data-driven decisions. Simple. It was built in a digital environment. Our industry was not. So there are some issues that we need to correct. Otherwise, it's like we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. So a few years ago, when BroadSign's, one of our innovative customers in the States, they operate over 14,000 screens. They asked us, can you help us integrate with a DSP, a demand-side platform? We said, yeah, sure, no problem. We have an API. We can help you out with that. And so we did the integration, and what we realized very quickly is that if we continue to integrate in the same way that digital does, then digital out-of-home media owners are going to get the short end of the stick. And that's because, business side, in digital, if I'm on my computer browsing the internet and I see an ad, I count as one impression. And that's what the media owners get paid for. But in digital out-of-home, let's use Eindhoven Airport as an example, because we're in Holland and the screens are once again powered by BroadSign. There are many people that are looking at those screens. So why should the media owner only be paid for one impression? It just doesn't make sense. They should be paid for multiple times of that. And we can correct that using customized technology. And on the technology side, well, there are a few things too that need some resolving. One is that online, the banner ads, they're super small in size, and they can load very quickly. And out of home, not the same thing. We are dealing with some pretty big files, and if the connectivity is low, it's going to take a little while to get those up on a screen. And the last thing we would want is for travelers at Eindhoven Airport to view a little loading symbol as they pass the displays that they're walking by. Another tech issue is the fact that content needs to be pre-approved. I was just about to say that if there was PG-13 content on screens in the Eindhoven airport, that everybody would have a really big issue with it, but that's not necessarily true because we're here. So let's pretend that's like Dubai airport or something. Nobody would appreciate it if some content that shouldn't be playing on the screens made it up there. So we need to make sure that the media owner has the ability to approve or deny content before it's played. This doesn't exist in digital, but by all means, it needs to exist in the workflows that we use. And then finally, I put it out by itself. Individual publishers or media owners are too small to be high priority. And I know that we like to think in our space that we have networks that everybody should be looking at. We have customers who have 10,000 screens, and that's very big to us. But to demand-side platforms who have Snapchat on their list of priorities for integration, one 10,000 network alone isn't necessarily going to be the biggest deal. So we need to all combine together on an SSP or a supply-side platform so that we can make a bit of a splash as a group. And I'm just going to skip this because we can talk about BroadSign's SSP a bit later if you want. But once again, echoing Jose, even if we correct the technical and business issues through programmatic, through automating our workflows based on data, we're still not going to resolve the fact that many different media owners need to be contacted to execute a campaign. And so that's where programmatic, once again, comes into play. If we all join forces through an SSP and we do it right, then we'll make it a lot easier. Once again, thinking about Drake, we'll make ourselves easier to get and make it that much faster to bring in extra revenue from digital and mobile and TV into our space. And so data, audience measurement, this looks familiar to you guys, I see. This is a Grandi Stazioni totem, and I'm not going to talk about them because it already has been mentioned, but Grandi is a BroadSign customer, and they are so innovative in the space. They have been thinking about programmatic and about the issue of how do we sell against other media, not classic out of home, but TV, for example. They've been thinking about this for years. And their solution, hope I'm not giving away all of your secrets, but their solution is to use BroadSign's proof of performance reports, Quividi's automated audience measurement, and a special data company, and they're able to sell against television in a way that makes sense to buyers. So we're not thinking about what makes sense to us. We're thinking about how do we adapt to make sense to them. We're making ourselves easier to get. So with that all being said, this resonates with some people more than others, but I've certainly had similar experiences. Over the past few years, there have been a lot of announcements in our space about programmatic, new programmatic solutions, new programmatic campaigns, and people get really excited because they understand all of the great things that come with us finally bringing these workflows into our space. But like the fellow who was in this car when might have gotten lost and did a U-turn and so on, you quickly become frustrated because you realize that a lot of these announcements that we've seen in the past few years aren't repeatable, or maybe they're not solving the problem 100%. So we learn as we build, and from these learnings, we are getting pretty close. And that's not just through BroadSign's SSP. There are others here today who are also finding out what has to be done to do this the right way and in a way that we can duplicate and allow to work by itself, which is the whole promise of programmatic. So we're almost there, even if it didn't take the most efficient amount of time. And at least we were driving in a Mercedes, so we were comfortable. And with that being said, thank you.